Hey, Julie, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful we get to interview you. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Courtney, for having me on your program. It's such a nice service to writers. I'm Julie Rogers. I've been writing since high school, studied journalism in college, and received a degree from SMU. I'm a freelance ghostwriter and editor, going on about 10 years now. I started out freelancing with Upwork and James Ennis Group, and I've recently signed on with a company called Eddie Oak in New York City, which I'm very excited about. This is an in-house editing partner for 14 publishing houses across the globe, among them Gamma House Publishing and Simon and Schuster. I also ghostwrite and edit for clients who contact me through my own company, julierogersbooks.com. Projects I've written are varied, anything from novellas to novel series, self-help, how-to, inspirational, spiritual, blog and technical, academic, plus resume and LinkedIn profile enhancements. Genres I've written in include YA, children's, adult fantasy, stories based upon or inspired by true events, contemporary, paranormal, and sci-fi romance, as well as thriller, horror, and action adventure. I've also done some screenplays and screenplay doctoring along the way. I enjoy working with first time indie authors as a one stop shop, helping them to write, package, and get quality books on the market, and to avoid those costly missteps in the maze of self publication decisions, to reserve their funds for advertising and publicity. I have 7 books of my own, and the seventh one just launched in May, Falling Stars, and this is an urban fantasy.
I would love if you could tell us more about what your most recent book is about, and then even if you want to tell us more about the other ones as well.
Sure, glad to. My most recent book in this story, in Falling Stars, 9-year-old Tommy Lucas needs a bone marrow transplant in order to survive. But he's a very imaginative little boy, and he's convinced that his disease is a curse on his bloodline, that he's a vampire. His mother's an oncologist, but Tommy insists that only magic can cure him, or the same synthetic blood substitute developed for urban legend and vampire, Viscount Claudius Fallon. Now, Fallon comes from a ruling class of vampires in Cardiff and is said to have traveled to Eureka Springs, Arkansas, seeking a cure for his own leukemia during World War II. Tommy is stoked when he discovers a 5-part series about Fallon in an online pulp fiction magazine called Philly's Argosy. And he believes the information in this story will help him locate Claudius Fallon. His quest leads him to befriend a local artist in Eureka Springs named Callan Masters. And Masters struggles with his growing affection for Tommy's mom, June, for Masters is Fallon, cured in 1939 at the Baker Cure for Cancer Hospital there. Since Fallon, aka Masters, is dedicated to living off grid and keeping his identity a secret, he must decide whether or not he'll take the risk in helping Tommy or falling in love with June. He's also survived over half a century on a blood substitute and is committed to living as a human, and he fears being studied or outcast. Because of Fallon's own illness, his bite was never capable of turning anyone, or so he thinks. My other books, let's start with the beginning. My first book was a self help book, Happy Tales. And if I sum that book up in a single concept, it is how do our furry friends help us through difficult life events like recovering from a divorce? I went through a divorce, And I hate processes. They are nightmares to me. And I needed something that would point me to the milestones. I'm going through this stage now, I'll go through this stage next, and so forth. That is what Happy Tales is. It is a book on divorce recovery that takes it in stages, not only the stages that you go through when you go through a divorce, but also the stages when you meet someone new and, what am I going to do now? Right? Number 2 is Seven Shorts. Seven Shorts is a novella sized book, 7 short stories. They're sort of campfire ghost stories, and they span the years 1969 to 2045. And my main element in that whole book was, how many ways can I tell something scary? My third is When Pigs Fly Over the Moon. It is set in Lugenbach, Texas. And the single concept in that book is, if you love them, stop boot scooting around it. Willie Whalen and the Boys, of course, right? My fourth book is Hootie. Hootie was inspired by a true story about an owl that my dad raised. I wrote Hootie as a children's book, and it is designed to be an integrative learning experience. It's an upper elementary reader for for grades 3 through 5. On my website, julierogersbooks.com, I have downloadable free lesson plans and classroom activities. And the book is designed to complete a school quarter. The next book is Simeon, A Greater Reality. Simeon is a metaphysical spiritual book. Who speaks to us beyond the electrical impulses in our own gray matter? And Simeon is known for its glossary. It has a great metaphysical glossary. So anybody interested in like digging in under what some of these things mean, they can find it in Simeon. It was my first experience. So much like Jane Roberts, it's disorganized in a way, but yet not, because it deals a lot with my own trepidation in anything that is stream of consciousness or channeled type material. The next is my book, Letters, and that is co-written by me and my son. The full title is Letters, Sidereal Insight for a 21st Century Mystic. And the idea is that when my son was growing up and when he was 9, he had learning differences. I also recognized a lot of this intuitive power in him, and I felt like I needed to guide him in it. So I wrote these letters when he was 9 for about a year, and then I blogged it. When he turned 20, he reread them and he said, "Hey, Mom, I want to answer your letters." It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Everything is shut down. He was frustrated with his college. He was like, "Okay, I cannot get online and do what I want." And so I said, "Well, start writing." And so he did. And we published that book together. So that's all my books. I think I covered them all.
I love that. Those are so amazing. What inspired you to write your books?
Well, I'll deal first with Falling Stars. I think I dealt with those a little bit on all the others, but Falling Stars is an interesting one. When I was 10, there was a boy in my 3rd grade class who was a friend of mine, and he was an avid fan of the TV cult classic Dark Shadows. Now, not many people know what Dark Shadows is anymore, but it was a daytime soap, and it was filmed in New York City by Dan Curtis. And this little boy would hurry home every day after school to watch it. It was during the daytime soap's heyday after Canadian actor Jonathan Frid joined the show at about episode 232, and its ratings went through the roof. Um, Jonathan Bridd was the vampire Barnabas Collins. My little classmate could pass for a vampire himself. He was a complete package. He had dark hair, dark eyes, long cuspids, and he could act the part. He even had a flashy cape, and it wasn't just some old cheap one. He regularly entertained our classroom performing Barnabas Collins impersonations. I was curious about Dark Shadows then, but my parents censored it. And probably for a good reason. It would have frightened me. Years later, though, revisited the memory, including the little boy's whole live action role play in third grade. And that was really before LARPing was a thing. He did it because he loved the TV show, and the theatrics were fun and games when school got boring. But it posed a question which became my muse. What if a young boy role played a vampire for a much more serious reason?
Love that. When you were writing your book, who were you thinking of when it comes to who the book is for?
I originally wrote Falling Stars as a screenplay and a screenplay treatment, and I pitched it at the Maui Writers Convention in 2001 to Allison Rosenweig. She was one of the producers of Wind Talkers. I put it away with all the other pitches that didn't get greenlighted at the time. And then I pulled it back out in 2021. I figured 20 years is long enough to sort through some things. The original screenplay version had a YA or PG feel to it because I put the major focus on Tommy Lucas. But in the novel, I had more room to weave in some incredible Eureka Springs and World War II history, as well as to develop the whole Claudius Fallon persona, this vampire human hybrid who struggles with his own disease process and how he integrates a successful art gallery into a tourist destination without being discovered. Because of some of the medical and historical complexities in the story, though, I decided that I would target this novel for adults.
Love that. How long have you been writing and what made you really sit down and start to write?
I won a themed essay competition in high school, and I think that sort of got me started. I've always kept a running list of story ideas or ahas, ones that usually occur when I'm pushing toward the finish line on some other project. Falling Stars was one of those story ideas. A friend of mine from our local writers group gave this story a hearty thumbs up, and I had a good feeling about it too. We'd just gone through the pandemic, and I'd lost both my parents within 2 years of each other. My dad waged a 5 year losing battle with multiple myeloma or bone marrow cancer. And I think that really contributed to my passion to tell this story. Although I outlined the project much earlier, back in 2001. Um, yes, it does deal with cancer, but I've been told by people who have read it that it deals with cancer in a lighthearted yet effective humor that pulls you through the story. The timing in 2001, I realize now, was wrong. I wasn't the right person writing this story the right way in 2001.
Love that. What is your schedule like when you are writing a book?
Well, I'll start with, when I'm ghostwriting for others, because that does take a little bit of precedence sometimes. And so when I'm ghostwriting for others, it really depends on the imposed deadline. I usually start the day with a 30-minute call to action meditation before 5 to 6 hours at the keyboard, and I hit the gym at 3. When I'm writing on my own stuff, I tend to break it up differently. I do the meditation, then 1 to 3 hours at the keyboard, hit the gym, and then maybe a couple more in the evening. But, sometimes I wake up at 2 a.m. and if it feels right, I'll write a few hours then. I usually don't take weekends off either.
Love that. What do you need in your writing space to help you stay focused?
I have found I really do rely on my internet toolbox. I usually keep about 5 or 6 tabs running at one time, and they are Chicago Manual of Style Online, Merriam-Webster's online dictionaries, and that's the complete set, unabridged, collegiate, and medical, an online thesaurus, Microsoft Word, Perfected, and so on. If the internet does happen to be down, I'll usually read a book or an article offline that contributes to what I'm doing and make notes later.
Love that. What is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Well, I'm here to tell you, Falling Stars was built on a ton of Panera bread. We have a nice store about 5 minutes away that's usually quiet in the morning. I can get usually 2 to 3 hours before the lunch rush, and I have their tomato or autumn squash soup.
Love that. What type of books do you personally enjoy reading?
I don't really have any one personal favorite. I do enjoy historicals, romances, fantasy, sci-fi, paranormal, dystopian, educational, inspirational, how to, and memoirs.
Love that. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
I really had to think about this one for a while because I had to go way back into my formative life, right? And I remember as a child, I was drawn to coffee table books. My mother had several, and I looked at them frequently. And the one that particularly inspired me, and I still have today, was Apples of Gold by Joe Petty.
Love that. What books did you grow up reading? Did you have an all-time favorite?
I won't say I had an all time favorite, but I was always drawn to books about mystery and discovery. Books like A. A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh and Now We're Six, Lewis Carroll's Alice Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys Mysteries, Charlotte's Web, Black Beauty, anything Mark Twain, Charles Dickens, Frankenstein, Dracula, Gone with the Wind. In high school and college, many of the classics became my favorites. Wuthering Heights, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Finnegan's Wake, The Scarlet Letter, The Hobbit, Catcher in the Rye, Animal Farm, 1984, Brave New World, Grapes of Wrath, To Kill a Mockingbird, Beloved, that was a big one. The Color Purple, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. I would say that all of those stories left their marks.
Love that. On the opposite side of that, now as an adult, what are your favorite series or authors that if they come out with something, you automatically grab it?
Right. Yeah. And that's such a tough choice for me because there's so much new and emerging talent out there, like Emily Henry, Stacey Willingham, and even the re-emerging Bret Easton Ellis. Some of my choices might surprise you, though. And I think all of these I have read, I would say, during my adulthood. C.S. Lewis, Paulette Giles, Jane Roberts, Thomas Harris, M. Scott Peck, Thomas Aquinas, even the Reformed Baptist preacher C.H. Spurgeon. Then there's John Grisham, Annie Dillard, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, J.K. Rowling, and Toni Morrison. When I was writing Falling Stars, in addition to all things Anne Rice, Bram Stoker, and John Polidori, I went back and reviewed works in that 1939 and that was works by James Joyce specifically and poet Hart Crane. Over the past few months, I've enjoyed reading Matthew McConaughey's memoir, Spare by Prince Harry, The Rabbit in Me by Bart Briers, The Voice Celestial by Ernest and Fenwick Holmes, and 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I know that happens to be an all-male lineup. Imagine that.
Love it. What would you tell someone just starting out with reading again?
I think it's important to read books that fill up your soul, that challenge you, that make you think. We have so many different ways to read books now, and I would say try them all: audio, electronic, hardcover, softcover. Take a speed reading course so that you have the option in your tool chest for some types of reading. And don't be frustrated by things that you must read slowly and break up into small sections, particularly if you sense what's there is important for you.
Love that. On the opposite side of that, what would you tell someone just starting to write their own book?
I think I tell them three things. I would say first to join a writers group or a forum, whether it's local or online, and hopefully one with members who focus on building up each other's passions to write. Ideally, the group that you would choose will have other writers who aren't afraid to give you constructive criticism and who are willing to suggest ideas or fix-its and work with you to help you improve your craft. Number two, I would say spend an hour each week studying what's on the market already, whether it's online or in a bookstore. And don't let the sheer volume of books or the competition discourage you. And don't try to read them all either. You'll find that you start to get a feel for book styles and patterns and the way people think and express themselves. This is important for developing your own voice and your own style. And number three, if you haven't already, go ahead and invest in reliable computer, um, good writing software like Microsoft Word, Scrivener, or Atticus. Even if you plan to hire an editor when you finish your book, you can save time and money by double and triple checking your grammar, spelling, punctuation, and style using a combination of Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Scrivener, Perfected, Chicago Manual of Style, and Merriam-Webster's. Words and styles are constantly changing, so be prepared to look everything up, even things you think you already knew and already knew you knew, right? When you have your copy polished to the nine, read it out loud and you'll catch typos or any remaining word flow problems, word repetition problems. You can even use an AI program like Adobe's Read Aloud and follow along in your original manuscript.
Love that. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Well, lately, that I have two pet snails, and they are named Dewey and Decimal. I'm pretty much a sucker for any little critter who walks into my life and says, "Rescue me." So during a recent cold front, Dewey crawled across the dog yard and huddled on the back door threshold where the heat escapes underneath the weather stripping. And Decimal was hanging onto the side of the house.
Love that. Is there anything you would like to say or add?
I've enjoyed being on this podcast, and thank you again for offering this service to writers.
Thank you. Where is the best place for readers to find your book? I know some readers love signed copies. Is that an option and the best place to connect with you?
Yes, all my books are available on Amazon, of course, and I have an Amazon author page. They're also available on my website, julierogersbooks.com, and those can come as signed copies. And if your listeners look up my website and subscribe to my newsletter, I'll send them a free short story and a quarterly newsletter with writing and publishing tips.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on today. We're so grateful that we got to interview you. We'll be sure to drop those links in the show notes. That way, everyone can find you. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney.